Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Afternoons with the Ambassador. And we are back with another installment of our Babylon 5 Season 1 review. And with me, as always, I've got my two good friends, Mountains of Elysium and Doctor and author Adega Outlaw. And today we're going to be covering both parts 1 and 2 of Voice in the Wilderness. Actually, the very first two-parter that we get in the Babylon 5 series. So, really looking forward to the discussion, delving deep into this one, almost as deep as they go into Epsilon 3. So, guys, good to see you both. Great to have you back. How y'all doing?
Doing great, thank you. And once again, thanks for having us on. This is always good fun doing these discussions.
Yeah, thanks. It is a blast.
It is. Well, and as I said, this is the very first two-parter that we ever get in terms of the Babylon 5 series and everything. And honestly, I think this particular story was worthy of a two-part story arc because there's so much and everything that goes on in these two-parters that, well, you want to get your views up and everything for a series, but at the same time, you want to tell a bigger story. This is one of those times when you have to have a two-parter. And there's a lot of great stuff in this two-part story arc involving rumblings from within the heart of Epsilon 3. And we learned that the planet itself is a lot older and chock full of mysteries and anything that we could possibly expect. So, fellas, with that being said, where do you want to begin? Let's get it going.
The third rule of sentient life. No, actually, that's I was really interested by it.
Okay. Well, as Delin said, draw incorrect. But yeah, what is the third rule of sentient life? Self-sacrifice of others. Or self-sacrifice of
yeah, I'm going to self-sacrifice you. No, it's the ability to be able to forfeit your primitive natures to the benefit of someone besides yourself, to give yourself a way that others will be saved, rescued, bettered, uplifted, yes, all at your expense, and do it without reservation.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with that, just for the simple fact that that particular thread is very strong throughout this episode because, of course, the resolution of the episode of the two-parter is the fact that somebody has to make the self-sacrificing act to save millions, or 250,000, if not more. Because once Epsilon 3 goes kablooey, it could have an effect far bigger than just Babylon 5 and the ships that are in proximity to Epsilon 3 during this episode. And yeah, you get a great character in terms of Drawl, which I absolutely love in this episode. And of course, I think it's in either season 2 or 3 when we get the return of Drawl after his time acclimating to the great machine of Epsilon 3. And Drawl is such a fascinating character to me. It's a shame we only get a couple of interactions with him in the series and everything, but I think at the same time, the less you see of him, the more you think, what's he up to down there on that planet inside that machine? And I'll say this. One thing I will say about the machine on Epsilon 3, I think somebody got some inspiration from Forbidden Planet. Just saying.
That's not a bad analogy or comparison, I should say.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the design of the great machine inside Epsilon 3, and you look at like screenshots or whatever from Forbidden Planet in terms of the machine that Dr. Morbius is interacting with, and he takes them on a tour, and you of course have that great chasm that has the bridge across the great chasm and everything there inside the heart of the machine. You're just like, okay, somebody definitely took some inspiration from Forbidden Planet.
I think a lot of people play on that because
Mhm.
they're releasing the new, or I guess you'd say it's the extended ultimate cut of the first Star Trek movie.
Mhm.
And when you have V'ger, it's the same thing. It's one colossal giant machine. Now, when I did mine, it wasn't going into vast machines, it was going into energy. The
Mhm.
things that the Nor, who are my advanced society in there, if you were to look at one of their computers, at least at the end of their society, it
Mhm.
would be a ball of energy that you can interact with just by touch or by voice or by emotion. Where these guys, the creators, they seem to feed off of the same thing: bigger, better, flashier. I don't,
Yes.
it's kind of a cool idea, but it's kind of overused or cliche to my taste.
Well, and I can appreciate that and understand it, but you need to have some grounding for your audience and everything, so that they have a point of reference for where you're going with um, your ideas.
Right.
And the really cool thing about this episode is you get so many different character moments. You get a very good story arc in terms of Mr. Garibaldi and his past, and him actually working with Talia Winters and not being so. That's it. Okay. Garibaldi was never hostile towards Talia Winters, but we know he has a big mistrust of the Psi Corps, just about as much as Ivanova does. But he still reaches out to her because he considers her a friend and he considers her someone that can aid him in finding out about his former flame, Lise Hampton. So, but to the larger arc of this episode, you have Drawl come to the station, and then of course you have those holograms popping up and everything all over the station of this very odd looking alien, which kind of looks like what we would consider a gray or whatever. But at the same time, he is very much. He's not a hostile alien by any stretch. That comes later. But he's like, "Help me! I need your help. I'm stuck down here." It's like, "Well, one of you crazy kids, please come help me. I'm not in a good way here." So,
It's interesting. He appears to people like we were talking earlier of people who are willing to self-sacrifice.
mhm.
Drawl, Sinclair, Londo, and actually didn't realize it until this viewing, Ivanova as well.
Mhm. Well, and
And
Garibaldi too.
Garibaldi, I don't was he to did he appear in hologram form or was it as himself?
Um, no, but he does go down to the planet
Oh yeah,
to try and rescue or to try and help Malari and Delenn and everything when they take Drawl and the other alien. I think it's the alien's name was Varn and everything back down to the into the core or into the machine on Epsilon 3. So.
Yeah, but I think with Elysium, I'm with him that the original reaching out was to those who would be most sensitive to actually
Mhm.
taking his place.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Well, and of course, the really interesting thing about this is you would not you open up the episode with them doing some geological scans of the planet for the simple fact that they're curious. There's been some apparently before the episode even starts. There's been some subterranean. There's been some seismic activity on Epsilon 3, and people are like, "What the heck is going on down there?" So they send a scientific team to figure out what's going on, and of course, you get that beam or whatever it was that gets sent out from the fissure there on within the planet of Epsilon 3, and yeah, and very quickly to the chat, Speaker for the Dead. Good afternoon, sir. And by the way, Speaker, I really enjoyed yours and Loki's conversation on comedic war movies. So that was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, honestly, for me, this is one of my favorite episodes because I always like anything that deals with the idea of ancient alien civilizations and so on. And this really feeds into my inner sci-fi geek vibe.
Gives him the tinglies.
Yes.
I'd love to have seen the character, was it Dr. Tashaki, appear more, because I actually thought he was a really good
I agree.
character. He was, and when Ivanova chewed him out with the "I am God" speech, I thought that was brilliant. That's a brilliant.
Man. On your way back to the station, I want you to memorize the Babylon 5 mantra. Ivanova is always right. I will listen to Ivanova. Ivanova is God. And if I don't do what Ivanova says, I will personally rip your lungs out. And then she looks up towards the ceiling of CNC, and she's like, about that God thing. Just kidding. No offense. I'll say this, I don't mean it as a slight, as a good Orthodox Jew would.
Out of any series with a hero or heroine doing a chastisement speech, Ivanova has to be in the top 5 out of all of the characters ever written that have those best speeches, because that's not the only one.
Oh no!
Especially on the White Star. Who am I? Oh, that's epic! Absolutely,
oh, man, I cannot. Yeah, that
I am Death speech.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who am I? I am Susan Ivanova, commander, daughter of Andrei and Sophie Ivanov. I am the right hand of vengeance. And the person that's going to kick your sorry ass right back to Earth, sweetheart. I am death incarnate. God sent me. Oh, I just got chills.
Yep. I mean, for her to deliver each one, she delivers each one with, you believe her.
Yeah, you really do. Even
when you wake up in the morning, you are very grateful that she was not your mother.
Although I wouldn't have minded if Susan Ivanova had been my mom. Well, honestly, to be truthful, in a lot of ways, my mother is very much like Susan Ivanova. Except
she can read your mind. Just remember that. You won't be able to lie to her.
Right.
Except
right.
As far as I know, we have no Russian blood in our ancestry. Or at least my adoptive family doesn't, to the best of my knowledge. So, speaker for the dead, got chills. Thank you. I aim to please. At least I try to. So, but yeah, back to the episode itself. You know, this for me is in my top 5 or my top 10 of favorite Babylon 5 episodes, because I have a list. I do. I have a list of top 10, and this is in that top 10 and everything, both parts. And you know, what? I feel like I've talked enough, guys. You let's go where you want to go with this instead of me, please.
This is just a brief aside before we move on. It was another some of the humorous speeches in this when Delenn was taking Drawl around to view the station, and she took him to see Londo.
Oh, yes.
He was seeing the hokey pokey, and he was going.
Yes.
And it was just so interesting that I had a concept before that if our civilization ended, in 1,000 years, someone came to view and rummaged through the ruins, they'd find toilet brushes everywhere and wonder, were they religious objects? And it's the same thing with Londo. For us, we know it's a nonsense song, but he was looking for the deeper meaning, and it just speaks to communications between races. It's just throwing that in there.
I rather like the song. Don't you dare tell him that.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, for Drawl, he can understand the meaning of it because obviously he is from the religious caste. He is sort of a philosophizer or philosopher, and he would have the philosophical insight to really find the meaning within the hokey pokey.
One of my favorite jokes out of the entire series, one of my favorites, is when the two are standing in front of the lift.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, he always seems to be there. And Sinclair goes, yeah, I know Mr. Garibaldi, and one thing he's not is omniscient. Door
Yes.
opens, and there is a grinning
There he
idiot
is with
looking at
that,
him.
with that darn grin, like, yeah, I was here.
I think I'll take the stairs.
And he's like, and Sinclair's like, I'm with. I think I'll join you. But yeah, honestly, this is truly a great episode because, at the very end and everything, Garibaldi's talking with Delenn on one of the observation decks or domes or whatever, not CNC, but one of the observation places there on the station. And he's like, why'd you do the end run around us? And Delenn's like, well, I knew that if Sinclair had gone, he would be the one in the machine right now. And she's like, he's looking for purpose. He's looking for a reason for his existence. And and she's like, she makes this illusion. It's just a little bit of world building. He has a greater destiny ahead of him, which we all here know what that is, obviously. But, I think that's one of the great things about this episode. It really asks the question, what is the purpose of our existence? What is the purpose? Who are we calling out to in the wilderness asking for direction? Asking.
The answer to that is easier than what you would think.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because, we see these stories of these heroes that are placed with great challenges and rise to the occasion, but one of the more basic purposes for our individual existence, now this is getting really general without getting religious or specific, but when you are placed in a position to choose to do what is best, what is right, what is better, your point of existence is to make the right choice. Yes. And if you can consistently do that, then you've had a worthwhile existence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what level of the world you're at, what situation you are in, standing with the public, with private, even if you are alone in the wilderness, like you said, crying out, the choice still makes the character.
Yes. I would wholeheartedly agree with that assessment of Dago. Well said. And of course, speaker for the day, coming with the comedy, he also loves Daffy Duck. And
don't you mean the Egyptian god of frustration?
Yes.
Yes, the Egyptian god of frustration. And also to the chat, My Sphere's Origins, it's good to see you, my friend. Glad you could pop in and say hi for a minute. Hope I'm doing well. Hope you are as well. So I won't speak for the other gentlemen. I'll let them do that themselves. So, but yeah, one of the interesting aspects of this episode is everything seems relatively mundane and normal on the station, and yet down below them is a ticking time bomb. And they don't even realize it and everything. I mean, they figure, well, it's just some seismic activity. Every world's going to have it at one point or another. But, you've got Sinclair overseeing a trade agreement between Mollari and Delenn. And that leads to another interesting point because we haven't seen G'Kar in a few episodes, to be honest with you. But Mollari and Delenn are having this discussion. They're doing this trade agreement, and they hammer out the details and everything. And Mollari makes the comment that if the Narn could stand together all in one place at the same time and project their hate across the stars, they could probably destroy the entire Centauri Republic. And Delenn
That
makes
brings
a
me to a
comment.
point too.
Go ahead,
ahead.
please. Well,
No,
Delenn,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Delenn makes a comment. She's like, hate can dissipate over time. She says it's just previous to Londo's comment. And he's like, you don't know the Narn the way we do. Of course, let's be candid here. The Centauri royally screwed over the Narn in a lot of ways. But Adega, please, go ahead.
Well, it goes with my theory that I put in the book, The Universe is Math, but he said that the equation, where there is equal and opposite reaction. They attack, you have to have an equal and opposite reaction where you attack back. He had it wrong. The equal and opposite reaction isn't to hit with force, it's to do the opposite with equal strength. Meaning, instead of attacking and destroying, you build and bind. That would be the true equal and opposite reaction. Instead of hating, you love. Instead of tearing down someone else, you build them up. That would have ended the whole conflict, and he didn't see it, and they didn't understand that.
Yeah, because the problem for the Centauri is they have a very myopic view of things. They can't often see the broader spectrum of matters and everything, and unfortunately that leads to Mollari making his one great mistake when he's talking to Mr. Morden. He doesn't see beyond the choices that he is making, the statements that he is putting out there. And unfortunately, that will lead to a lot of heartache and a lot of grief and a lot of sadness for not just the Centauri, but for a lot of people across the entire galaxy, unfortunately.
Well, in some ways, I think we're fortunate that it was him, because the Technomage episode, which is coming up, the one tells him, he gives him his prophecy about all the victims and everything, and he says, I could kill you, but there would just be others to take your place. The thing is he was wise enough to know that Londo had qualities in him that would help him turn things around. Even though his hands would be almost completely tied, he was still somewhat grounded in a place where he would be able to do something that was going to benefit his people and the rest of the universe, instead of just completely falling into that darkness that the Technomage saw. I'm sorry too, because we're not letting Elysium talk.
No, I was fascinated listening. I was actually thinking the same thing about the Technomages, and the one episode where you see Londo's true character is in the season 4, where he tells Veer, kill me now, to save Centauri Prime. He's willing to sacrifice his own life. Regardless, he said, don't even think about it. Don't wait, don't hesitate, kill me. And I don't think Lord Rifa would make the same decision. Londo has really great qualities.
He does.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mouse, please.
I'm saying, sorry, unfortunately, Centauri culture doesn't always allow that, where there's a lot of, I know in this universe, Emperor Turan is trying to change that, but there's still so many harkening back to a nobility they probably never possessed, and which drove them to persecute the Narns, which drove them to do awful things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Londo. In some ways, it's the line that Garibaldi says, have you ever looked into his eyes? He's terrified. He's holding on to a beast he can't control.
Mm-hmm.
Londo's a good man, Veer, and they're co-conspirators. So there is good in Centauri, but yeah, he is Eldrick, the Technomage was right. Had he killed Londo, there was so much negativity and rot within Centauri society who took his place, the whole universe could have looked a lot darker.
Yeah, and that's true. And you get, as we've already mentioned once or anything, you get a great character moment in terms of Londo and Delenn and Draw and Londo's quarters and everything when he's talking about the hokey pokey. But the other great moment is when Delenn is like, we need a pilot. We need a crazy pilot. And Londo's like, hi. I can fill that bill for you easily. So
I liked his line. If I was a landing thruster, where would I be? He's turtling towards basically certain death. Like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'll push this button. See how we go.
Yeah, quite literally, because he's not familiar with the controls of an Earth Force shuttle and everything.
They were in a life and death situation, and he was having fun. So a lot of his combat character.
Well, yeah, because if you've seen combat, if you've faced death, you're going to have somewhat more of a jovial mood because of it and everything. And you've got Londo in his element in a lot of ways. It's a life and death situation, and he's like, let's see what kind of wisecracks I can make. And there's a great line in the beginning and everything, I think, which we reviewed several weeks ago. And old Londo makes the comment, it was good to see light and laughter before it gets too dark for me to see anything. And in a few episodes, particularly when we get into season 2, we slowly start to see and this is no pun whatsoever is intended, you see the shadows start to fall across Londo's eyes, and darkness starts to set in around him. And unfortunately, he really has no one to blame, even though he tried as hard as he could to separate himself from the shadows. You start to see the darkness that is surrounding him and the choices that he has made that have led him to all of this darkness, all of this dread, all of this death that will eventually encompass and swallow him whole. Anything throughout his life.
And the sad thing is he ignores the better angels of his nature, even with we are warning him. And when he realizes it's too late.
Yeah. Well, one of the other parts of this two-parter that I really enjoyed was actually seeing a almost normal Earth Force officer in charge of a ship in this episode. I mean, I know Pierce, he's got his orders and he's trying to follow his orders as best he can, but he doesn't come off as let's just be candid here, as an asshole doing it. Unlike Colonel Ben Zane, or as Mr. Garibaldi called him, Mr. Hitler. So, yeah, thank you. But it was nice to actually have a almost civil interaction with an Earth Force officer, which gives you the impression that not everybody in Earth Force is a jerk. But there's another moment, I think it's in the first part of Voice in the Wilderness, when Draw's talking to the land, and he's talking about the fact that he's going off to the sea. But he's talking about the situation back on Membar, and the fact that things are starting. The people are disquieted. They're on edge. They are not happy and content as one would hope, unfortunately. So, gentlemen, any thoughts on that?
Actually, it almost follows on from last week where we saw Neroon butting heads with Delenn, that we can see things are not right. Even from the Gathering, where the the Breakaway Clan tried to frame Sinclair. So there is elements within Minbari society that there is a rot. Just as there is within Centauri, just as there is within Earth, and probably within Narn itself, because we see a lot of infighting from the Parliament of Dreams, where the senators were all fighting, sending assassins. So there is a general rot within the universe, I think, that the shadows are able to move within.
Mm-hmm. You know, the mountains. That was very insightful, because that's something I never considered before. The fact that there is so much rot and so much corruption within every major race and everything that's represented on Babylon 5. And of course, you've obviously, and this is even partially true and everything, especially after the death of Kosh and everything with the Vorlons. There is rot, there's corruption even in their society, and they're considered one of the more advanced societies. And, you know, this is something I've discovered in reading the works of our good friend down below and everything, Adega. Regardless of how much technological advancement a society or a culture can have, that can still leave the moral core vulnerable to corruption and to decay. And it allows the opportunity for terrible things to take place. So, any thoughts on any of that, gentlemen?
The parallels are always there. Any society that becomes good, usually it comes at the end of some great struggle, some terrible event, something that shocks people into realizing it's better to be good to each other than to be bad. But when things go bad, it's usually slow and insidious and bit by bit and hidden in shadows, where groups are infiltrated, their perversions are taught, they persuade other people, whether it be through outright conversions or blackmails or various different means, to slowly rot things until they have enough strength to where they can grab hold of the people who've become complacent and force their will upon them. We're facing that right now, where the watchful eyes of those who know better have been shut for too long. And the next generation, or the current generation, has to be the ones that open their eyes and see what was lost and what is coming, and are able to rewrite the ship. And to have a louder voice than those ones that are screaming through the darkness, trying to shut out the light that was so hard fought for by previous generations. And it's the same for all of these societies.
Yeah. Well, and very briefly to the chat, Fiona Wolf, good afternoon, ma'am. It's good to see you. And obviously, well, honestly, both Speaker and Fiona bring up two very good points. Speaker and everything he says, the way Drawl talks about the Minbari, it reminds him of how Tolkien described how the elves view things. And of course, I've got Fiona's up here. It's apathy of leadership also. The Great Council doesn't believe in Valen's warnings. Earth force is overtaken with shadow influence. Along with the Centauri and the Narn are a dying people. Yeah. I mean, even Kosh sees it and everything. Sees the truth of the nature of the war between the Narn and the Centauri. And it's the Narn in a lot of ways had the potential to bring unity to the galaxy, considering everything that they had gone through, but instead they were bound up in their hate. And unfortunately, that hate allowed them to be overly cautious and focus too much on trying to destroy the Centauri rather than looking to see how they could be of assistance to the rest of the galaxy that's fighting against against the shadows. So, but you know, what you both have said is very true, especially you, Adega. It right now, and right now I'm gonna focus particularly on what's going on in this country because it's obviously where we live, except for mountains.
Well, same thing's happening over there.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true too. Sorry,
There's
mountains. I wasn't trying.
No, there's things happening globally that every country has their issues, has their problems. And
Yeah.
in some cases, it's on the surface. And in many ways, that is probably better because it's something that will focus your mind. It's when it's under the surface, like we see in this show, when you don't see it clearly. That's when the real infection sets in.
Well, and
Fiona has it right. It's just like the shadow, the darkness that I had spoke about, but in the shadows in the story, they are all about division and conquest. And the way they were beat is the equal but opposite. It's the unity in binding together of all these different races that made things strong enough to overcome that shadow in the dark.
Yeah. Well, Fiona brings up a very good point at the offset. Babylon 5 is about rebirth. Eventually, all these factions unite, go through a crucible, and come out on the other side stronger. A play of light and dark. Yeah. Well, I'll get a little personal here for a minute. I was talking with Mam Ambassador last night. We were talking about current events. And it quite literally breaks my heart to see all of this nonsense that's going on in our country and quite literally around the world, but I'll go to my context. I am tired of seeing all this rioting and destruction. I am tired of seeing statues being torn down by a bunch of illiterates and uneducated people who don't know any better. And the thing that triggered me, and I know that word is played out, but in this case, it's accurate, I think. I recently read a story about, I think it was like 3 or 4 churches here in the United States, one in particular in Boston, where someone had taken spray paint and vandalized a statue of the Virgin Mary and wrote idol on it. And I heard about churches being burned, and I know, Mountain, you've mentioned that yourself. And I, for one, I talked about this just a few weeks ago on a stream I had on here when that idiot Sean King was talking about tearing down statues of Christ and his family and tearing out stained glass windows with the image of Christ. It makes me physically ill. It makes me madder than all bloody hell to see these children who can't even look beyond their own nose and who are being led by the nose by a bunch of duplicitous and self-serving halfwits, and are causing all this mayhem and destruction and vandalism because they are too bloody stupid to think for themselves. And I've made this comment before, and I will make it again. It is time for the adults to get up off the couch and send the children to their bedroom and tell them to stay there until they learn to do better. And I think everybody in the chat, and you two gentlemen, will get the analogy that I'm drawing here.
Yes.
I'm trying to be... Go ahead.
Just to point that my wife and I are different races. And in where I live, I think there's 54 different nationalities.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than fighting over what's happened before, what's gone wrong, there was a plan here now. We changed our residence group, so it's not happening this year, but we said we'd come together, we'd cook, each country would cook dishes from their own culture, we'd get together in the green and we'd share our different cultures, but just come together. Rather than fighting, we'd celebrate what we have and bring it together. And I don't
Yes.
see why that couldn't be a solution. Everyone has their own background, and it's valuable, and I respect all backgrounds.
Mhm.
And we have something to share rather than destroy. And I don't see why every culture one culture has to be destroyed at the expense of
Of
another.
another.
You can share,
Yeah.
like the idea of the melting pot. Bring your culture, share. My wife cooks Ecuadorian food, I cook Irish food, and sometimes we mix them together and it works. My neighbors are South African, Latvian, Indian, Pakistani. There's American, English, all over. We each have our unique cultures, and we all work together just fine. And I don't see why that couldn't be a solution.
See, all
Well,
the destructive forces and everything that we see out there. I know we're getting off the show, but it's
well, I'll share us back
it
on
digs
here.
at you, and like you said, you were talking with your wife. I think every family, regardless of where they're from, these type of things will dig at them and ache at them. The difference, and I go along with Elysium on this, is what that does to you. Does it motivate you to be angry? Does it motivate you to stand up and fight back? Or does it motivate you to stand up and try and unify? What is the equal and opposite reaction? The
Yeah.
true equal and opposite reaction. Being angry is something that they are fueled off of. If
Yeah.
you're angry back, it's wonderful to them because they feel vindicated. If you shout at them, they're good at shouting. If you call them names, they're very good at calling names. But they're not good at intellectual. They're not good at spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's where you reach them. And if they can't reach them, at least there'll be enough voices of reason that unify together to where they realize, hey, maybe we really shouldn't do this because those voices are much louder than ours.
I
Yeah.
think one solution is just to lighten the mood a bit. What Londo said in this episode: look at them and say, whatever it is, it can't be that bad.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I can be at times a very emotional person. I recognize that fact, but I don't let my emotionality try to cloud my better judgment. And am I saying that violence and destruction should be met with more violence and destruction? No, I'm not. I think civil debate is the best weapon that we have. Reason and logic will oftentimes, if not all the time, win out over irrationality and emotionality. Even though emotion can be one of the most powerful tools that you can employ to try and reach someone. And to kind of steer us back onto the episode and everything, particularly with the resolution of this episode, when you have the Earth Force cruiser coming through, and you have you have Pierce and everything, and then of course you have that other ship show up that's from the same race as Varn and everything, the alien that was in charge of the Great Machine on Epsilon 3. You can almost draw an analogy and everything between the resolution of the conflict and the resolution of that episode and what's going on currently in our own societies, in our own cultures. Because the aggressor, all they see is opportunity to take power and to do what they want. They can't look beyond their own self-interest or their own self-serving attitude to do anything more. But you have, even though Sinclair and Pierce don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree with one another, at the same time they realize that they need to unite for mutual defense. And of course, you have Drawl intercede and say, anyone approaching this planet will be vaporized. And he is more than willing to do so until the time is right for people to come to Epsilon 3 again. And Pierce, I think, has enough good sense to realize, yeah, we're outmatched here, considering you see what happens to that other alien ship when Drawl releases the the full destructive power of the defenses of Epsilon 3. So Drawl and Sinclair, and to an extent Pierce, are the voices of reason that say we need to work together to overcome a much greater threat. Because they try and reason with the other race, but unfortunately it doesn't work, because all the other race sees is power and opportunity and nothing more. And the truth is, in terms of what's going on in our own cultures, our own societies right now, an open hand is going to get you a lot farther than a closed fist. But there are times, and I'm going to quote a movie I don't often quote, when a shepherd has to defend his flock from the wolves. There's going to be times when you can't reason with the wolves, and you're going to have to stand up against them.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah, to quote another great movie of mine and everything, I think it's a favorite of a lot of people, is The Dark Knight, when Alfred's talking to Bruce. Some men aren't after anything tangible. They can't be bargained with, reasoned with. Sometimes all they want to do is watch the world burn. And I think there are certain elements within these groups that are going around doing what they're doing just because they want to watch the world burn.
There'll always be that 3 to 5%. They gather friends and strength over time, but right now they're all being exposed for what they are, and in some ways we need to be grateful that we can actually see what's going on.
Yes, very true. So,
just one more point for me,
Sure.
and I'll be quiet, and this isn't related to what we're discussing. This is not totally, but it's different. I think, no, I know the answer to this because I remember reading it, but I can't quote the source. But I'll ask you guys. Epsilon, was it populated by first ones originally? Were they the
Not
ones
that
who made
I'm
the great
aware.
machine?
Not that I'm aware of, although you could make the argument that it is possible, considering how advanced the machinery on Epsilon 3 is. I mean, they don't ever state, unless, Mountains, you found something in the Lurker's Guide that I wouldn't be privy to.
I'm not sure. I didn't actually research it. And, well, we'll have to ask Zatras in the next one. If Zatras...
Yes, because next episode we get Babylon Squared and we get introduced to a great character, Zathras.
Not confused with Zatras.
No, it's Zathras. You got the wrong one.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's true. It can happen.
Even though it's the same actor, except for the times when you see other people within Zathras's race. So, but yeah,
Zathras. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That's honestly one of my. He is, even though again it's a character we don't get a lot of exposure to. He's a great character. He really is. But
Actually, one thing in the Lurker's Guide I did find was it always bugged me that it was Sinclair and Ivanova went to the surface. I said, why would two senior staff go down into that situation? And it was only JMS spoke, he said, after the Mambari War, first contact, and this was the first contact, must always be with a command level officer, preferably two, without any lieutenants or junior officers there to mess things up with a wrong look or an aggressive gesture. So that was why it was just those two went to the surface, because for a long time that bugged me. I was going, well, why? It didn't make sense. It's the same thing often in Trek. Why do one or two senior staff go down? And it makes sense. Once I read through that, it started to make sense. So it fixed the problem, and I only saw that this morning.
Yeah. Well, and, just real quick, Speaker brings this up. Speaker, I guess you missed me talking about that because I referenced Forbidden Planet and everything, talking about the Great Machine and the design of the Great Machine, the fact that it looks so much like one of the one of the installations there on the planet in Forbidden Planets. So Altair 4, I think was the name of the planet. So, but like I said, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite story arcs. Great pair. It's a great two-parter. It's our first two-parter within the series, and it's a big story, and I think it has a lot of good in it. So, but fellas, is there anything else you want to bring up and everything? If not, I think we're going to go ahead and close up and everything for the afternoon.
Just one small bit for future world building. You see in later episodes, and it's part of the issue that the colonies, like Mars colony, Proxima, are all taxed. But yet the guy Garibaldi beats up at the bar is complaining that we Earth citizens are being heavily taxed to pay for the colonies. So there is, you hear Marcus in later episodes mention that we are excessively taxed by Earth corporations. So everyone seems to have been pitched against each other. The colonies against Earth, Mars against the colonies. And so it's just something to keep in mind for world building, where you hear the colonies giving out. The citizens of Earth are facing exactly the same things, but they just don't talk to each other.
Very true. So yeah, I almost forgot about the whole issue with Mars and everything and all of this, because we kind of got off on a tangent. But yeah, thank you for Mountains. Thank you for bringing that up. So, well, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and close out here. I want to thank you all for being here. Speaker for the Dead, Fiona the Wolf, and My Sphere's Origins. And as always, share this out with your friends who might be fans of Babylon 5 or just really good sci-fi and everything. I want to thank Mountains of Elysium and Adega for being here as always, guys. This is a lot of fun. It's great delving into this show with both of you, having two fellow B5ers and everything who know their stuff. It's a pleasure. It's truly. Is there anything either one of you want to plug before we do close out for your channels?
I was going to say thanks to all those who subscribed. I passed 50 subscribers, and I was thrilled. So thank you all.
Right on. Congratulations. Excellent.
Growing up.
Yes,
I have...
Nope. Go ahead.
Far away, Adega.
No, it's your moment. Go.
No, I was just saying, kind of one of these days I'll be wearing big boy pants. So woohoo!
You'll get there, Haas. Don't worry. You'll get there. So, Adega, what about you? Anything you want to plug before we close out?
Well, I have, my normal show with Loki tomorrow night, and I have one on Saturday with Fortean. But for me, and I have to apologize to Speaker because I didn't exactly know his timing, because he's starting his stream on Sunday, which I hope everyone's going to be there, 7 Eastern Standard Time. But I also, unfortunately, scheduled the prologue for the Organza Witches. The book's coming along really well. So if you want to see the prologue, it will be there. Don't expect chapter 1 to be coming next week or the week after, but at least you'll kind of get a glimpse of where we're going.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely. Anything from your brilliant brain, I look forward to, believe me. Well, folks, as for myself, coming up tomorrow night and everything, 7:30 Central Time, we'll have. As I mentioned on Twitter this morning, I'm doing some rescheduling because we've got a birthday party to go to for a friend of ours from college and everything on Saturday. So, and I'm going to reschedule the Bad Movies That We Love stream for tomorrow night at 7:30 Central Time. So be sure to tune in for that. And to anybody in the chat that wants to be on that stream, if you're interested, just DM me either on Twitter or Discord and let me know if you're free. And then, of course, Friday, I've got a double header and everything. I'll have another installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador. And I will be talking about a little work. Okay, not so much of a little work, but a recent work by our good friend down here below, doctor and author Adega Outlaw called Children of the Directive. I'll be doing a review of that, so be sure to tune in for that at 12 Central Time. And then, of course, Friday night, 7:30 Central, going to be doing another watch party, and we're going to be watching a great 80s classic, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So be sure to check that out and anything if you have time. And as always, if you want to be on the panel for the watch party, just let me know. So anyway, folks, y'all have a great day. I will see you all on Thursday evening. And until next time, this is the Ambassadors signing off.